Hello. My name's Teresa Cariño Peterson, and I will be breaking open the theme for this weekend. So about 10 or so years ago, I attended my first teach-in. It was the first time the teach-in was here in DC, having moved from Georgia. And it was the first time, at least that I was aware of, that I heard God speak to me. Later this evening, we're going to have a prayer service that honors the people who have given their lives for the sake of justice. People who are so rooted in their faith that they decided that building the kingdom of God that they imagined was something worth dying for. So 10 years ago, sitting in a ballroom very similar to this one, holding a candle honoring these people, I heard God ask me, "Are you willing to lay down your life for the justice you seek?" It was unsettling. I had, by that time, been a self-proclaimed jerk for justice. I was self-righteous and overly judgmental. You could not eat a Kit Kat in front of me without me telling you about how Nestle's supply chain is riddled with human trafficking. Thank you. So now here I was with my God in front of the communion of martyrs, and God was asking me, how far was I willing to go? How strong was my conviction? Could I go beyond my self-righteousness and my judging? I was young at the time and naive and being challenged. And God was asking me to go beyond performative acts and truly put my life on the line. So naturally, I was like, call me again in 5 years. I really wouldn't mind being Holy Ghosted right now. Thank you. Really proud of that one. Yet that question lingered. Are you willing to lay down your life for the justice you seek? Over the years, that question has been molded and refined, and I found myself asking, what exactly was the justice I was seeking? What did I imagine the kingdom of God on earth to be like? Which is very fitting because our theme this year is imagining a path forward. So I want us all to pause for a moment, and if you feel safe and comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes and use in your imagination, or in your own imagination, kind of go through the questions that I'm going to ask. What do you imagine a world of justice to be like? What is your dream of justice? It may be a bit hazy or a little blurry, but just sit with it for a moment. What do you imagine a world of justice to be like? Now, we are embodied, sacramental people, so we're going to use our senses and experiences to add texture to our imaginations. What would the experience of living in a world of justice be like? The prophet Amos says that justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. How would you experience it? What dimensions does this world have? What contours, what colors, what textures? What does justice smell like? Is it sweet, floral, spicy? What does justice taste like? If justice was on the tip of your tongue, what would it taste like? And finally, what does it sound like? What can you hear? What vibrations can you feel? This is the world of justice you imagine. And if you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes. Throughout this weekend, we're going to return to this world that you've imagined, one that you've imagined and sensed. And what you are learning about, what you are praying, we're going to let that bend and stretch and color inside and outside the lines, continuing to add texture and dimension. Because we need a world of justice that we have not yet known. For far too long, our imaginations have been distorted. In their book, Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery, Mark Charles and Seung-Chan Rah write about a set of papal bulls that give the political and theological permissions for colonization. Those are called the doctrine of discovery. They say that the diseased theological imagination, like the doctrine of discovery, contributed to a dysfunctional social imagination, like white supremacy. And that has perpetuated unjust leaders, systems, and structures. Diseased and dysfunctional imaginations have created systems and structures of inequality that presume, emphasizing on presume, the superiority of white, straight, cisgendered men. So when the founding fathers of our country wrote that they held these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, they were speaking only of white, straight, cisgendered men. And they wrote laws that protected and ensured the success of these men. Then from the tip of this pyramid, the diseased and dysfunctional imaginations created a racially stratified hierarchy, placing one above another, all on the basis of white and black, fully human to little more than a beast. So in order to work for justice, we need to move forward from where we have been. We need a new imagination of justice and wholeness, peace and truth and kinship. We need a new imagination that we create together. The pandemic has revealed a great chasm in the status quo. The world as we have known it has quaked and cracked in the midst of the rising global death tolls, the murders of Black and brown people in America, the increased violence against Asian Americans. The list goes on and on and on, and the chasm gets deeper. And this is where we find ourselves. We've fallen into this abyss to discover that some have been here all along, buried and forgotten like the native children of Christian boarding schools, covered up by dirt and grass and the foundations of our country. We've fallen into the abyss, and we have seen that the foundations of the world in which we had lived in were rotten from the start. We have found ourselves in a liminal space between old and new, death and rebirth. We're in a borderland. And the late Chicana activist Gloria Anzaldúa, she wrote much about borderlands. She said that borders are set up to define the places that are safe and unsafe, to distinguish us from them. And she continued to explain that a borderland is vague and undetermined, created by the emotional residue of an unnatural boundary. It is in a constant state of transition. The prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. Again, in the borderland, the prohibited and forbidden are its inhabitants. So it is in this deep chasm, this liminal space, this borderland, where we must do the work of reflection and reckoning, centering our kinship on those who are prohibited and forbidden. But do not be mistaken. The work we must do is not quiet nor cloistered. Reflection cannot happen by being still. We must do the work to educate ourselves, learn from each other, question our sense of what is right and what is wrong, and who gets to decide that. If you are here in person or if you are listening at home, you must engage those around you and the sessions that you partake in. Because the Ignatian Solidarity Network is not simply a network of family, but a community of wisdom. Our deep and difficult reflections must lead us to a process of reckoning, which includes and considers those who have historically been and continue to be oppressed by systems created out of distorted imaginations. By reckoning, I mean truly listening. By reckoning, I mean expanding the narratives we have grown used to hearing. By reckoning, I mean letting the stories of others infiltrate and expand our own imaginations. And all of our work must be centered in a radical kinship. No one can be left out of the conversation. No one can be buried and built over, forgotten by time and unmarked graves. As Father G says in his new book, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, we need to see each other with the eyes of belonging. Now we must choose to be allies as never before. And as the theologian and minister Miguel A. de la Torre, he challenges us to say that liberation is for the abused and their abusers, those whose humanity is lost through the complicity of these same structures. No one can be forgotten. In order to move forward, we must imagine a new path, dismantling systems of oppression and creating systems of justice and mercy. That requires a new imagination, one of wholeness and healing, one of truth and peace, one of openness and liberation. We need a new imagination in which we fully recognize that God is in all things, in all people, in all creation. Simply put, we need your imagination, and we need your conviction. So I ask you, is the world of justice you imagine one worth laying down your life for?